Hello. Thank you for choosing WebItMD's brand new video podcast, bringing clarity to life and business decisions. A mini-series where we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners about conventional and unconventional ways to up-level success in both their personal and professional lives. Welcome everyone to the final episode of our mini-series. I want to take a moment to tie our episodes together from the perspective of its title, bringing clarity to life and business decisions. We started out on this topic by discussing how you can gain clarity in your personal life through things like breathing exercises, visualization practices, building a routine, self-care, and how we speak to ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves. From there, we saw how that personal clarity can help you show up differently or better in your role at work. That can look like finding ways to be more productive, more self-aware, and developing that emotional IQ and empathy in how you show up for your team. We even started a broach on how to gain clarity in business through peak performance techniques, how to meet your prospects where they are, and how to solve a problem or get out. So today is a great episode because it not only builds on the past episode's themes and tips, but it helps paint a picture of how you can gain clarity on your business model and practices for better success. We hope you enjoy. I am here with WebItMD CEO, Mattan Danino. Welcome to our final episode.
Yes, indeed. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Mattan, I've already started to repaint the path that we designed this series to follow. The first half, episode 1 and 2, being more focused on concepts or philosophies like self-awareness and emotional IQ, empathy, that business and sales leaders can implement into their daily practice. Then we started to see that shift in our last episode from this focus on personal and professional self to the more nuts and bolts tactics for better business performance and practices. We talked about peak performance selling, what it is, how to achieve it and sustain it. And I'm really excited about this final episode because it continues that same vein of talking about sales. And now that we know what peak performance can look like, how can the rest of the business structure and departments implement processes to help enable sales to see that peak performance and hit goals for sales numbers and objectives, what have you. So sales enablement is one of those notoriously buzzy words in our industry. And I know we're seeing acronyms or jargon like this come up more often around sales enablement. We got sales and marketing alignment, RevOps or revenue operations. But I bet if you went from professional to professional, definitions would definitely vary. I mean, you and I even saw that as we were workshopping this episode together. We talked a little bit about what sales enablement meant to each of us, and even between colleagues on the same team, we had varying definitions. So for the sake of this episode and our discussion on sales enablement, let's create a concrete definition.
Yeah.
What does sales enablement actually mean to you in your words?
Totally. Yeah. It's all over the place. I mean, sales enablement to me is really about aligning three kind of key parts or synchronizing three key parts of a business. There's marketing, there's sales itself, and then there's customer support or service, some would call it. The purpose of all of that is to improve the sales experience, both for prospects and also the effectiveness of the sales team itself. So all businesses want to grow. Sales is sort of the key function that drives that growth. However, in order to do that, it needs to be supported marketing, typically before sales, and I would argue support or customer service after sales. It's really this sort of cyclical approach. And all of that is considered to me sales enablement.
Awesome. So now that we have this concrete definition, kind of thinking about that, and if it were universally accepted as the definition for sales enablement, and it became what we know it's on track to become, which is pretty well known in business practices, there'd still be this wariness or leeriness from business leaders and sales leaders when asked to look at their current sales process. Why do you think there's this kind of wariness when people are asked about their sales process?
I think it's a soft spot. I think sales is the one thing a business owner or VP of sales or whoever sort of in charge of driving revenue, it's something that they don't really want somebody else to come and mess with, whether it's an outside consultant or an internal person gets hired to build more efficiency in sales. It's a lot of ego involved there. It's something that they hold close to the heart. And when you tell someone that their business needs help and their sales operation needs help, they're not really so thrilled to hear that. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say they view it as a failure necessarily, but you're sort of questioning the core practice of the business, which is driving revenue through their sales team. And I think that needs to be looked at. Many times it's overlooked. And when doing so, you obviously are putting aside the idea that your sales couldn't be more efficient or more effective. And I think that's just a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this idea of not knowing maybe as well that sales enablement is what they're looking for. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that? Like maybe they just don't, especially at the SMB level, they maybe just don't even know that sales enablement is a thing, or if that's something
Yeah.
that should be happening.
They,
So,
they, right. No, just to touch on that, they don't know that that's, we're talking about here as a term to define it and sort of educate folks. I think when you think about sales or revenue generation, revenue growth, you mentioned earlier, CRO, essentially a chief revenue officer, somebody in charge of driving growth, generates revenue within an organization. And that person is looking to connect the different functions of a business. Now, an SMB doesn't have that person, right? They don't have that role. They're too small to really have that role. So I think what they look at, or what they should be looking at, is sales enablement. They just don't know. And that could be carried out by an outside group, or they can hire. But there should be somebody who comes in that helps bridge the gap between marketing, sales, and service. Whatever you want to term that, sales enablement, rev ops, hiring a chief revenue officer. I mean, that is the function of that individual or an outside party to come in and help support.
Of course. And you mentioned for the SMBs, they might not have the resources or the team or the budget to have what those larger businesses have, like the CRO or the RevOps team. But maybe, are there any classic pain points or questions that SMBs might already be feeling or asking themselves, where your answer is this, yeah, you need sales enablement, that could help them understand that you're already looking for it. So this is how you know that you're looking for it.
Yeah, I think most business owners will start asking themselves simple questions around like, how do I continue to grow my business? We're getting good leads, quality is there, close ratio is poor. Yes, we see leads are coming in, however, revenue's flat. How do I improve my sales team? Maybe I have a 10% sales team. How do I generate the same revenue with only 6 people, thus saving on 4 salaries? I mean, these are things that business owners think of, no doubt. I don't think the way that they think how to do it, however, is to implement programs that drive sort of the conversation through marketing, through sales, and through service. I don't think that's happening. I think first things first, as a business owner, when they think sales, if sales are not doing well, okay, well, let's talk to our sales team. Their close ratio is poor, or something of that sort. And I don't think that's always the case. Maybe they're getting unqualified leads from marketing. Maybe the sales team's doing a fantastic job, but then the retention team or customer service team isn't doing a great job. So essentially, they're losing as many clients as they're selling. All of these are factors that need to be looked at. I think small businesses basically know that those things are the questions they're asking themselves, but don't know that they should be addressing it sort of cross-function.
Right. Instead of taking that more holistic approach of their business and thinking that question could be answered across the board, it's just focused on this one department. That definitely makes sense. So now that listeners have that idea of what sales enablement is and have a better understanding of if they are already looking for it, even if they didn't know they were, or, whatever reason that they may have, what are some ways that they can get started with sales enablement that are maybe more in line with their budget and resources? i.e., what are some low lift ways to start thinking about or implementing sales enablement more slowly or effectively for their size?
I mentioned asking questions, and I think what's important with sales enablement is determining like what is success, for your business. It might be a higher close ratio, but it might also be better customer retention. It might be, I mentioned, having a leaner team that's more productive. Maybe it's building automation. Maybe the business owner is sort of really in deep in the weeds of the business, but wants to have just more personal time or whatever it is to actually own the business as opposed to operating it day to day. All of these sort of practices that are built in is part of sales enablement. So you have to define like, what do you consider success for the business? And if success is just about generating more revenue, then it has to be looked at, like I keep saying, across the board. I also think what's important is to be looking at people. So at the end of the day, all the businesses that we run, whether professional service businesses, even product businesses, SaaS businesses, et cetera, you have to have certain people, like functions within your business. And those individuals are human beings. And so most of us are at the end of the day in the business of managing people. They have skills, those folks, but there's people. And so I think having those departments talk to one another and sharing insights across marketing, sales, and customer service, what that ends up doing is creating sort of processes internally where you could define like where are the gaps in those processes. Maybe marketing is doing a great job. The handoff, however, is very poor. Maybe technology doesn't exist. There needs to be some type of automation that could do that handoff more easily. So we'll touch on that a bit more if you'd like. But I think what's important is that you have to have processes that can scale. And most businesses just sort of worry about somewhat of like a linear growth, I think is very common. But I think you should be thinking about, all right, what if we want to go from 10 customers to 50 or from 50 to 500, but also do it with not going from 50 to 500, if that's a 20x growth, I don't think you want to have 20x the team. And the way that you think about doing that is by building some of these sort of automation and practices into the business. Those need to be considered earlier than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually want to dive deeper into tools and technology. I think it's absolutely vital to the success of a business in 2022. You spoke a lot about that efficiency and scaling responsibly is what it sounds like, as part of this getting started process. And I think on both fronts that heavily comes back to your tools and your technology. So why should SMBs care about the tools in their tech stack? And maybe what are some use case examples where tools and technology can be easily implemented and utilized for sales enablement?
Yeah, sure. I think tools and tech generally is viewed as more of a marketing function as we think email marketing, marketing automation. Yeah. These are all beautiful tools, a live chat, even on a website. These are all sort of first touch points with prospects. But as you think about technology for sales, technology drives efficiency. And efficiency drives revenue. And revenue is sort of what we're all trying to create here. So as we tie things back to sales enablement across marketing tools, then sales tools, and even service tools, having these tools allows various sort of functions of the business to know what's going on with the other one. And I asked many business owners on exploratory calls to share with me, hey, do you have an idea, like what's your close ratio? Where's your drop off from marketing to sales? What's your MQL to SQL dropout? They don't have any of these metrics. Yeah. They don't have any of them. And that's mostly because they're not aware of the metrics, but they certainly don't have the tools to measure them. So as you think about like sales in general, I'll give an example. Like sales typically has an opener, if you think about it, who's like an SDR, somebody who sort of prospects and does cold outreach. And then there's a closer. If those folks talk well to one another, just on the sales team with the use of like templates, if one's sending a template and does a handoff to the next one, meeting links. There's no need to spend time back and forth. When are you available? Let me see my colleague. I mean, this is all a waste of time. Just send a meeting link. Somebody can click based on their availability to schedule time. I mean, there's no back and forth emails. Sales sequences. This is a tool we've been using a lot for clients. And what this does is many times during the sales pipeline, a prospect gets to a salesperson. So salesperson's eager to jump on the phone and sort of close a deal, if you will. If that prospect, however, is not ready for a proposal or to move to a next step, they should be kicked back to marketing and be put into some type of a nurture or a drip series, if you will, because they're not ready to move forward. That's okay. But there has to be, again, the communication between sales and marketing. Sales can say, oh, this was a junk lead. They're not ready to talk to me. That's okay. You have to put them back, communicate back to marketing, and begin the nurture process. And then sales overall, I think what we're seeing, more organized you are in sales, we're finding single individual salespeople now are managing 2x or 3x more deal volume than it was a few years, maybe 2 or 3 years back. And so we're talking a typical salesperson could manage anywhere between 30 and let's say 50 or so opportunities at any given time. You got to have some type of a deal dashboard, as we call it, where you could look and see who's going on, what and where. It's impossible to go back and siphon through your email inbox to figure that out. So a deals or a deal dashboard, which many tools have that have deal stages from initial, let's say intro call all the way through proposal and then winning or losing deals, just have it organized in some type of a visual. So these are some of the tools and tech that we implement and recommend for organizations and that I use myself every day.
Yeah, those are awesome. I think if there's listeners out here who are maybe being to the idea of technology, some of the recommendations that you just gave, it could feel a little overwhelming. So maybe from your perspective, being someone that specializes in incorporating sales enablement strategy and processes and tools for SMBs, can you give listeners like a better understanding of what to expect? Kind of break this down so it doesn't feel like it's all just right here and there's steps to take that can help approach sales enablement and implement it into their company.
Sure. Yeah. Whether we do it, as an agency or you do it yourself, the first thing you have to do is audit. Okay. You could self audit or we can come audit, but understand what do you have currently going on at your business? How are you operating it? And how, if at all, are your departments within the business communicating, within one another? The next is to sort of define like, what is your approach for sales? So when a prospect comes in, are they really a prospect? Are they just downloading information and educating themselves? Or have they risen their hand and they actually are interested to maybe get a quote, talk to somebody, do a custom sort of approach or game plan for their business? Whatever the offering is that you have, defining at what point are they actually a sales prospect?
Yeah.
And then implementing some of the tools and tech that I mentioned. I mean, some of them are free out there. There's very inexpensive tools you can implement as well. I mean, we would come in and sort of implement that tech and then report on, is that implementation of technology actually driving growth for the business? Traditionally, like at an organization, this is done by different parties. So there's marketing that do their tools, there's sales that do theirs. And even within a sales department, each individual salespeople is doing his own thing or her own thing. There's no way you could track that. And there's certainly no way it all rolls up to a nice dashboard. So having some type of conversation internally that defines the objective for sales, and then having a conversation that says our goal or the objective itself is to grow revenue. We need marketing's input. We need customer services input. And obviously we need to feed that into sales to drive their efficiency. I mean, that is really the conversation that people should be having with themselves. An example, for us, we come in traditionally for the first 10 years of, as being an agency, we were all marketing. So SEO, paid media, social, content marketing, sort of the tactical, like top of funnel initiatives to drive traffic or growth to a business, we thought. But what we're really doing is driving digital marketing growth, web traffic growth, these sort of vanity metrics of growth. And we had a client that we did that very successfully. They agreed, we agreed, all the reports were sort of up into the green. And we all thought that the engagement was going well. However, sales would come back and say, look, we're not closing any more deals. And then we would look at the revenue team and they would say, yeah, customer service and like our new inbound revenue, it's kind of flat. So we would go back and look at marketing to see maybe marketing is the culprit, but it wasn't. It was actually the fact that the sales were dropping the ball. The sales follow-up was poor. The technology that was in place was all over the place. One gal using an Excel spreadsheet, one other person using some free tools. There's no way to manage that. So we ended up determining that sales and customer retention at the end of the day were the culprit. And this just led us to actually building out an engagement, here for ourselves that we call the growth stack, which now incorporates not just the top of the funnel, but also the middle nurturing and automation. And finally, this bottom funnel, which is really what we're talking about here, which is sales enablement. You do all those three as a business, and you have the sort of end goal of revenue generation, report all the way back up top to feed. Well, here's what closed this deal. This was what the prospect really cared about. Let's write a blog post about it. Let's produce a podcast about it. Let's speak to the point that actually drove, the close. That's very strong. And I think those really cyclical, what we call closed loop reporting type communication, I ask those questions on calls. Most people don't have answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it definitely just proves the point that cyclical, you can't look at each department in their own siloed, fragmented approach.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So if you could change the conversation on any of that, like what would you want to say about how businesses are currently approaching sales, marketing, service, every facet of their business? And what would you change the conversation to kind of hit what you're saying here with this growth stack approach or sales enablement?
Yeah, no, I think you touched on a big word there, which is silos. That's very common. Businesses operate in silos. Those individual departments report up to their VP of marketing or report up to their head of sales. And that's where the reporting stops. Sometimes it comes up to leadership, but I don't think leadership traditionally knows what to do with the information across all those department heads. So the changing of the conversation from a sort of fractured or siloed, as you said, approach has to be about revenue. Revenue generation is the key for any business and its growth. RevOps is a term that we're starting to hear more of here, or we mentioned CRO earlier. These are now individuals or functions within a business dedicated to revenue generation. And us as an agency, like what we're coming in and doing, and really what the growth stack is as an offering, is revenue generation or RevOps. We've termed it as the growth stack, but we are a marketing agency sort of at heart. But now what we really are about is creating revenue for a business. And that I think is the most impactful. that is how we're sort of judged. And that's how I think any engagement should be judged as we think about growth of a business. That's what we all want.
Yeah, it's an important conversation to have. And I think that it's going to be even more apparent because in their siloed view, if you can't look at it that way, because marketing, if it's poor, then you don't get the leads that you need to make the sales that you need to make. But if sales is poor, then, you don't get to the service side and, you're not making your quota. You're not getting to where you need to go. If service is poor, then you're going to get those poor reviews and there's going to be less leads flowing in. So they really all need each other.
I think sales enablement is always looked at as sales because that's how it's termed. I think what's important though, where I said it, when we first spoke, it's marketing, sales, and service. Mm-hmm. And when you combine those three, but the efforts of those all departments funnel into sales, that just makes sales definitely more efficient and certainly more effective in their efforts. So that is, to me, what sales enablement is all about. And just tying up the conversation, it's the strongest when you can force sort of that dialogue internally, and that's what we help come in and support.
Absolutely. So if people want to continue this conversation with you, ask you questions about sales enablement specifically, or how WebItMD can help, where can they find you? I know that we've talked about where people can find WebItMD, but how about you?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I love it. I mean, this is all the craze here. I think this is here to stay, and we're really doubling down on it in sort of the next year or two to come. We're developing this series, so we're certainly going to have more content that comes out on our resources, our resource hub, as we call it, on the webitmd.com website. LinkedIn, I'm going to be producing quite a bit more content also in the coming months on my personal LinkedIn. You can find me there, or via email. We have sort of an open, if you will, conversation at our hello@webitmd.com. Queries about your own business, just to pick my brain. I mean, I really feed off this, so I'd be happy to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your insight, Mattan. And I can personally attest that this is something that you love to speak about. So there you have it, everyone. The final episode of our mini series. It has been such a fun experience to speak with other professionals about this idea of bettering life and business. And we really hope that you have found tools, or at least insight into how you can show up better for yourself, better in your role at work, and better for others. That's your team, your prospects, your customers, all included. So if you would like to learn more about our sales enablement offering or the WebItMD growth stack, you can visit us at webitmd.com/meet. And we look forward to chatting with you more. Until next time, be well.